In addition to this webinar that we're doing today, we've got a couple things coming up that we want to make you aware of. On July 2nd, we have Aaron Orr, who is going to be joining us live for a session at Horace Mann, and that's going to be about navigating a generational shift among journalists. So that will be a good one, and that's going to be again on July 2nd at Horace Mann. And then we have another program that we're having on Thursday, November 13th with Storytellers Studios. It's kind of a guide for storytelling for marketers. But our big event that is coming up is going to be our session on AI. And that's going to be a day-long workshop, and that will be happening at UIS. We have all kinds of great speakers there. I encourage you to go to our website to check out all of that information, and we're going to start registration for that fairly soon. And I know that Christy is sharing a lot of that great information in chat as well to make it easy for you. With that, I don't want to delay our session today, so I will introduce our program's chair, Julie Heiser.
Hey everybody, I first connected with Joe Szynkowski on LinkedIn. We are fellow Salukis from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, and I know we've got a couple other Salukis in the audience today. And I delighted in Joe's posts on LinkedIn, which are always timely, informative, and just plain fun. If you don't already, plan to engage with him on LinkedIn after this presentation. But Joe is the founder and owner of the Upwrite Group, which is a strategic communications consultancy with one overriding goal: make clients happy. Since 2008, Joe and his team based in Marion, Illinois, have delivered white glove communications, executive branding, and public relations solutions for companies like Shell, Sprint, Circle K, Cisco. Content from the Upwrite Group has appeared in publications including the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Money Magazine, and others. Joe takes a boutique approach to client partnerships, treating each engagement with personalized attention that drives measurable results for companies both large and small. His expertise spans communications consulting, executive branding, public relations, and career development, making him a valuable resource for our group today. So if you're able, please stay on screen after his presentation for questions and answers, and join me in welcoming Joe Szynkowski.
Thank you, Julie. I'm going to have you hopefully come introduce me for every webinar I do. That was great. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? All right. And hopefully my screen doesn't freeze up. I'm sharing my screen, so hopefully that works. Yeah, I'm Joe. I run the Upwrite Group, communications firm down in Marion. So I'm not mid-Illinois, but I think everything south of Chicago is pretty much, Southern Illinois anyway. So been doing this really since 2008. I'll give you a little bit of my background, and then we'll talk a little bit about communication strategies, things I'm seeing from prospects and clients and partners that I think really go across the board, and hopefully you'll get some helpful tips. And at the very end, I've got a QR code that will go to an article that is pretty much today's talk with some workshop ideas that you can do with your team to hopefully improve your communications and content and all that good stuff. So that'll be at the very end. But yeah, I grew up around Chicagoland, moved downstate when I was about 10, 11 years old, and just kind of stuck around. I love the area. It's a little bit less hustle and bustle than a big city. But I wanted to kind of stay around here. Got a degree from SIU, so yes, go Dogs, in journalism. Met my wife. We've started a family since then. We have 3 daughters. So if you hear any singing in the background during the next 30 minutes, they're getting ready for theater camp. There's a lot of auditioning going on, so apologize for that. But no, I started working for the newspaper in Carbondale, so the Southern Illinoisan, while I was in school, actually. And did that for about 5 years. Wanted to be a sports writer. I'm a big White Sox fan. But the hours weren't conducive to starting a family. Newspaper hours are pretty brutal. So I started working for the state of Illinois. I got a job there back in 2008. And that was working through communications campaigns. We did a lot of in-school work with different schools in our area, which was just a great experience. Met some lifelong friends there. During that time, I started building my own communications firm. Really started as a freelancer, but I still loved covering games. I started writing articles for businesses, started doing a lot of resumes, And LinkedIn started to kind of take off at that point too. So just kind of found myself with a lot of side work. I would work from about 10 o'clock at night to about 3 in the morning every night, so I wouldn't disrupt my family's kind of life cycle. And once I got that to the point where I could kind of stop my regular hours at my regular job, I kind of took it from there. So I've been doing that since. So been working from home since about 2013, and I love it. I'll never go back. I'm not a good W-2. I don't like to be told what to do, and I learned that pretty early on in my career. So that was helpful to know. But yeah, so I'll kind of get into communication strategies for us. I'm gonna try to go to this next slide. When we take on a new client or an executive comes to us or a team comes to us, they're usually stuck on something. So, they're stuck on how do we communicate this new product launch? How do we communicate this new messaging we're trying to get across? I'm seeing that a lot in terms of technology companies right now, is they're just racing to implement all this AI stuff and machine learning, and how do they offer those services, differentiate their services when everybody's kind of doing the same thing now. I think technology is making it where in terms of that space, a lot of people are catching up. The smaller firms are able to do what a lot of the big boys are doing. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, usually they're stuck on something that they need a little bit of help with in terms of consulting and coaching. We're seeing that a lot across the board. What we do for that is we try to work people through this methodology that we've created to kind of get them unstuck. And a lot of it comes down to strategy and patience, but also on implementing the right tools to make you more efficient. We feel that, communications as an industry or as a sector is one of the most interesting ones when it comes to artificial intelligence and how things are kind of moving and shaking in that direction. So it really is an interesting time. I'll get more into this in a second, but for us, I work with a lot of AI experts, and consultants. Um, it's funny, half of them are very AI optimist, and they say, man, this is just going to help make us more efficient. We're going to be able to do things quicker and focus on our strategy. The other half of the AI people I'm talking to think we're all going to die. Robots are going to kill us all. So it's just kind of this 50-50. I try to stay on the optimism side, but I really feel like we're going to be at a spot where we are creating our own AI assistants and writing helpers and support staff, through technology. But we have to make sure we're going to be owning that too, because these things are going to be smarter than us and they work quicker. So we have to build the right tool set, but then we also have to be ready to control it. And I think those are the communications professionals who are really going to stick this out, whether this turns into another industrial revolution where the workforce completely changes in the next 5 years, or it's just kind of already hit its peak and we're all kind of overblowing it. Either way, the more you can kind of get your hands on these tools and start to own them, the better. So this is just a quick methodology. Like I said, on the article that I'll share, this is all built out with specific questions you can ask your team. But really, we'll kind of go through each one of these today. I thought that was kind of relevant, and then kind of walk you through some questions that you can be asking yourselves. So number one, when we work with companies and teams, a lot of times it's about slowing them down. This is probably the most important step of the process because a lot of times, especially in the business world, when it's so competitive, everyone just wants to run. They have a new idea, a new product, a new team member. They don't think through, we all have different channels and different audiences, and they need to hear different things. Your one audience over here on the business side, as far as prospects or customers, do not need to hear the same things that your internal teams are hearing. But a lot of times, teams will create a kind of spray and pray message, and they throw it out to everybody, and then hope it resonates. The most important thing you can do is slow down at the front end when it comes to communicating a certain message or initiative. And one of the tools we try to get teams to kind of implement and really more of a behavior, but it's asking questions. A lot of people don't take the time when things are this fast paced anymore to slow down and ask questions, especially the right ones. There's a time and a place for action and to get things moving. But when it comes to actually understanding your message, your channel, the visibility you hope to get from it, that's where I love to see teams get. When I see that light bulb click and they start to actually strategize and think through things, it makes a ton of difference. And startups. I don't know if anybody's on a startup right now or kind of a mid-sized company. A lot of times they might have the reputation of being the ones that get a little bit too far ahead of their skis and are moving too quick. But man, we see it a lot in the Fortune 500 too, where these different business units are all just kind of doing different things. And a lot of times that communication doesn't come back to the core values and the mission that you're trying to achieve. So slowing down, understanding the role is really the first kind of step that we take with our clients. And Michelle and Julie, I'll work through all this, but if there are questions in the chat or anything like that, I love to keep it conversational instead of just kind of talking the whole time. So feel free to slow me down or ping me. Um, when it comes to that next part of being unstuck, once you do slow down, there's a whole process in terms of what are you trying to achieve, who needs to hear it. Like I said, audience members are all different. And the more that you can customize, the better in terms of actually being, able to move the needle and achieve your goals. I'm working with a tech startup in St. Louis right now. They've got investors, they've got the media, they've got internal employees. And like I said, each message needs to be a little bit different because the audience cares about different things. Investors are not going to care about mission statements and core values and things like that. Investors are going to care about money and addressable market and how is this going to look in the next 5 years? How are we going to disrupt this industry? So trying to make sure you're naming the goals. I don't know in terms of project management software that you're using or that your team's using. We really rely heavily on Monday.com. It's a tool that we use for everything, in terms of listing out projects and keeping things specific. But also, there's so many workflows and automations you can plug into that to where you're actually letting the technology do a lot of the work for you. So, Asana, there's a ton of them out there, but we found that Monday just keeps improving. It seems like every week they're putting a new update out there that makes it a lot easier. And that's never been my strength. I am more of a strategist, consultative, how do we do this thing? I've taken a vow like over the past couple of years to get more process minded because I know that's better for my clients and better for me personally in terms of just not overwhelming myself. So if you're not using a program like that to organize your thoughts and organize your just overall workflow, I definitely recommend that. There's also one called Capacities that I've been using a lot lately. I should have put these on the screen, but like I said, I'll be able to share these afterwards. Capacities is a note-taking app. So if you've ever used Evernote or anything like that, those are all text-based. Obviously, you can put images in there and links and things like that. What Capacities tries to do, it's kind of a startup in that space. They're more about visual learning and mind mapping. They've tried to create a software that actually works like your head does, in terms of I can tell you how I got my latest client from Denver because it came through a referral over here, and she came from another friend of a referral. If I don't get all that into a space where I can go back and track that, I'm eventually going to forget things because my business is growing. Hopefully, everyone here, your organizations are growing and improving. At some point, you're going to need to unlock some of that stuff and be able to go back. So I highly recommend checking that out. You can organize it by companies, people, books, meetings, and then you'll start to see this visualization form where you can see how things are connected. And it's really helped me from a organizational standpoint, but also from a business, development standpoint. So once you understand and start to get your goals on the same page, especially if you're working with a team, it is important that you define that somewhere and you house it somewhere so everybody can kind of keep it on the same page. Otherwise, it's just mass chaos. So that's definitely kind of where we go. When it comes to syncing the voices, I'll talk about LinkedIn for a second. I see a lot of times when I work with companies, they'll have a founder who is just super smart in the clouds, I mean, just an idea machine. And they are most likely to take that to like LinkedIn or X or wherever platform they like to use. And they'll be the first block here, right? They'll talk about innovation, they'll talk about things that are changing in the industry. Then once they get to a point, they'll have HR. Their HR director will be talking about DE&I, which is super important, but it won't really be synced up to kind of the company mission. And all of a sudden, you start to have different messages going at the same time. And then not to poke fun at salespeople, but you got the sales team posting cat memes, because they'll post anything that comes to mind and they just want to go with content. I love salespeople, but getting them in a box and getting them the messaging that they need to effectively communicate the company message is probably the most important part and the most difficult part. But you can start to see this just as a kind of a small example, but we love to drive alignment among teams. So, not that everyone should have the same exact message. We want everyone to have their personality, but you should be using, tools and tricks that are able to get the team in alignment. And then you always want to be able to point back and be able to kind of market the company or the organizational mission as well. It doesn't take much to get off the rails, and that's what we see a lot of teams working on when we come in to help them. So, some tips and tricks for that is just more communications, being sure that you are having it takes 15 minutes sometimes to get everybody on the same page as far as a marketing messaging perspective and communications perspective. And as long as you can kind of start to sync those voices up, that's when we start to see conversations start, on LinkedIn and through X and through all the different social platforms because we've gotten comments that, man, we can tell that this company is getting more buttoned up because they are all singing from the same hymnal now, or they kind of feel connected. Again, you want to leave space for originality, but you also want to be able to start to tie these voices together. And I love cat memes as much as the next guy, but you got to make sure that it fits into the conversation. Um, once it comes to figuring out, the strategy, okay, things are feeling like they're getting synced a little bit, then it's really time to start testing and learning. We do not ever recommend, "Oh, here's your 1 year marketing plan, go run with it. Don't change anything. Let's see, report back in January, see how it went." That strategy is very outdated. It really comes down to being able to be light on your feet, be a little bit nimble, tighten things up. You'll start to see, as a LinkedIn example, if I'm working with a founder or somebody who's trying to get their message out there for the betterment of the company, we might start with a campaign where, we're going to write 3 to 4 posts a week. One of them is going to be a thought piece. One of them is going to be a little bit more conversational and personal. I want to see who's going to, which one of these messages are going to resonate with people. And then once I find that, then we can really hone in. And I think that's the same for communications across the board, not just individuals. That's for the company as well. Be willing to change up your marketing plan. Be willing to change up your strategy. Let your team think. I work with a guy who told me, man, we are so busy right now as far as checking the boxes and, making sure that at the end of the day, your checklist is done. He's like, we used to get paid to think. We used to get paid to strategize and make sure that we were bringing ideas to the table. So hopefully, if you're a leader within your organization and you've got a team and you're creating content and creating, messaging, hopefully you are allowing your team to have that space because that's where the great ideas come from. That's where, a shift in a strategy can really take hold. And I feel like the teams that aren't allowed to do that, why would they bring ideas to the table if you're not receptive to that? So that's more of kind of a leadership thing. But you want your team to have a voice at the table, raise their hand, and bring ideas up. Otherwise, why do you have them? Why are they on your team? So again, that all goes to tightening up the target, and making sure that those ideas do have a space, and then you understand that you are going after a certain segment, and you're trying to make a certain strategy, and then you can bring your people along the way. When it comes to the you part of our Unstuck, we really like to harp on the companies that let their people be a message and kind of be a vessel for the overall communications are the ones that succeed. We know that, for a LinkedIn post that goes out from a company, so let's just say it's the same exact piece of content, it's a case study or it's a blog article that you're trying to promote, that goes out from the company, it's probably not going to do very great. Company LinkedIn pages, unless you're really spending a lot on LinkedIn right now in terms of advertising, they're not going to reward your company with their algorithm. They really have turned to a Facebook model where you start spending, yes, you're going to start seeing your message get in front of more people. They're trying to promote more advertising, but that same message from a company versus coming from the CEO or from the chief product officer or marketing expert, there's like a 564% difference in engagement. And that just means how many eyeballs are coming to the post, how many times are you stopping someone's scroll? There's a huge difference there. So why would you not? We've worked with a ton of companies that are very strict, with their company, like their employees are not allowed to post anything on LinkedIn, let alone personal insights or opinions. They want them to just be completely quiet. And we just think that's one of the worst things you can do as an organization because people are buying from people. They want to start relationships with people, not so much with your company anymore or with your organization. There's been a shift there. If you look at LinkedIn's algorithm too, they've really started to reward video. So they baited that earlier this year and it went really well. And now you're starting to see all these videos pop up, and some of them are cringy, but they're starting to try to kind of button those up and get those into more of an expert kind of realm. But I recommend using video, especially on things like LinkedIn. Vertical video is the way to go for that, because that's how LinkedIn's going to present it when people are looking for video on mobile, which is the highest percentage of where people are spending their time. So we have clients across really from like LA to New York City right now who are picking up their phone, their smartphone, taking a quick video of themselves. The background really doesn't matter as long as it's not like super weird or dark. Just make sure you have a kind of a neutral background behind you. And then they're texting us those videos. We're running them through a couple of different softwares, like a CapCut or an Opus clip. And those things are able to cut those videos down with no editing. The AI does all of it for you. They add the captions for you. You'll want to check it before it goes out. But that's Opus Clip is free for the initial part of it. I recommend you guys try to use that if video is becoming part of your strategy, because that really is starting to resonate with people. And LinkedIn's rewarding that algorithm. I can't speak so much for X or Facebook because most of our business time is spent on LinkedIn. But making sure that if you are going to let your experts speak, you let them do more than just share the company message or leave a comment, making sure that they're able to actually express their opinions through posts, polls, videos, carousels. Let them get creative and don't let that kind of scare you away if you are leading a team. Um, that content from people is really starting to be more important as well because of AI and the trust factor with AI. We're already losing trust in AI. There's been polls that show we just don't trust it. We can, I think everyone can pretty much now read a post on LinkedIn or an article and say that came from AI. We can just tell whether it's using the dashes or if it starts in ever evolving world of technology or whatever. Like it's just people aren't being they're not taking the extra 5 minutes to fix that and put it in their own voice. So we're starting to see that AI trust is going down. The boomerang effect of that we feel, and what we coach our clients is authenticity is going to be huge over the next few years. And authentic messaging does not mean you have to be super vulnerable. You do not have to tell your whole life story and share family pictures and all that kind of stuff. You just have to spend a little bit of time on your message. And that's what LinkedIn's going to start rewarding because just like you've seen some of those tools like Zero GPT and things like that can identify when something's coming from chat or from Claude or from Perplexity. LinkedIn's starting to sniff that out too, and we're seeing the reach go down. If LinkedIn sees that that's where it's coming from, they know that people are getting tired of seeing it and they want the other stuff to cut through. So make sure you're using a little bit of discretion and a little bit of creativity when you're creating your content. And there's all sorts of tools like that as well that can help you. We do see one more thing too, just around AI and trying to keep it out of certain things. We run public relations for a lot of companies, so creative PR. We're trying to get our clients onto podcasts and publications because that is authentic and that is that third party validation. We can say how awesome we are as people and business leaders, but until one of those credible publications like NPR, Michelle, says, yes, we will promote you and this is great, we want your expertise. That's when you're really going to start to make some noise. So to that end, when we pitch clients for publication opportunities, journalists are very specific. They do not want anything to come from AI. If that pitch comes from AI, they're kicking it right out the door. And we've seen that become more of a thing lately, which is good. Journalists should want to protect the integrity of their publication and their audience and things like that. So just something to keep in mind, making sure that while unlocking experts is great, but let's try to also encourage them to share the right kind of content, if that makes sense.
Hey
Um,
Joe, before you move
yep.
forward, we did have a question from Tina Prather. She's with a nonprofit and asked, how do you encourage board members and staff to promote the organization while still staying on brand and using the messaging you want to use? Should she help them create the content?
I think that's a great question. And I would say probably at first, it kind of depends on your team's level of comfortability there. I'll work with some nonprofits and orgs that you can just tell from the first meeting they're going to need some help, right? Like their team members, I'll go and look at their LinkedIn's because I'm always looking for who are those 3 or 4 people that we could almost position as brand ambassadors on LinkedIn. And if everybody's a ghost, if no one has posted in the past year, if their content hasn't really resonated, then yes, I think you should probably step in and use some AI tools and make sure that it's on brand, but create messaging that is individual to each person. What I like to do sometimes when I'm ghostwriting for somebody, within ChatGPT, you can create your own GPTs. I'm sure you guys have messed with that, but it's a pretty simple process. It's over to the side. You can, hit the create GPT button, and then you can start to educate it and train it on that person. So if I have a person where I know that they've been in 10 media publications, they have a really good bio, I can pump all of that in there and it can start to learn the voice and give me ideas as far as what they should be talking about that'll be a little bit different from the other people on the team. So I do think that there is a challenge there. You don't want to go overboard and just let them have the reins. So if there is a little hand holding at first, if they're open to it, that'd be my first recommendation. And then hopefully what you get to is they start to see the posts that are performing well. I found that leaders who haven't posted in a while and they start to kind of get more active, they kind of get addicted to it because it is kind of this cool dopamine effect, I guess, to being able to get people to engage with your content. So I would definitely encourage that. But yeah, if there's any reservation as far as I really don't trust that they're going to be able to stay on brand, you've got that to consider for sure. So I think the baby step process of let's hold hands for a little bit and get through some of the content together, I think would be the right approach. Does that answer the question you think, or should I?
I
Yeah.
think you did a great job. Tina, did you have any follow-ups?
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Tina. Any other questions I need to stop for here? Julie, see anything else in the chat, or am I good to go?
I think you're good to go.
Okay, awesome. When it comes to creating content, because I feel like that's, to Tina's point, okay, let's start getting a little bit more active, but what are we going to be sharing? I read a really good book last year called The Content Trap. Would definitely recommend it. It's pretty lengthy, but it kind of goes into how companies are falling into this trap, organizations and people, of creating everything that they're seeing. I think it's just natural, like in our behavior, to see a post from someone else or a strategy or a communication and then say, we need to do that. I know CEOs and founders are really guilty of that sometimes, as far as like if I'm working on a marketing team, um, you know, just send you any idea that comes to mind. Why aren't we doing this? We should do this. I always try to get them back into the strategy, but there is something to that in terms of there being a lot of copycat going on, which is fine and works in some industries, but you want to avoid falling into the trap of doing what everybody else is doing. Before we jumped on, Julie mentioned there was an IBM post that went out this morning. IBM's super buttoned up and I would say a pretty boring brand, but they do really creative content. They've got surely some kids, probably some Gen Z over there on the side of the house, just kind of what can we do here? What kind of trends can we plug into? And their posts are really interesting. So they haven't fallen into the content trap of creating content like every other technology company. And I would say the same thing for you guys. If you're in a space where I love working with companies or organizations in higher ed or automotive, industries that are pretty legacy and really haven't, gotten up to speed. Because with those clients, I have an opportunity to make a difference and to help them with their messaging and help it really cut through. So if you are in one of those spaces, it probably is ripe for a little bit of creative content. And I do recommend working kind of multi-generational as far as a team. I'm definitely too old for TikTok and even Instagram, I feel like most days. So I kind of just stick in the business space. But I've got younger people who help me with trying to stay up on trend on the other ones, so we can make sure we're not, pigeonholing ourselves. I would recommend you guys doing the same thing. Um, but yeah, into the content too, it talks through some of those industries that didn't innovate quick enough. So in terms of like even newspaper, where I came from originally, I could see the writing on the wall as far as, man, all we were focused on was selling ads. We weren't focused on building out the editorial team, doing more creative content. And I feel like that's where a lot of those newspaper industries kind of hit the wall. We're starting to see a lot of independent startups come around, that are doing more independent publishing. And that's where, people kind of want to get their news from trusted sources. So in terms of being able to create content like that, that's just one industry. But this book goes through some of the steps now that we have some of those case studies and industries and organizations that fail to do things in a creative way. They've got really good tips and tricks. That author really went into some detail there. So, when it comes to creating, we do see AI becoming more of a factor, obviously. But like I said at the jump, you've got to be able to control what your AI stack looks like. And that's kind of a technology term, but if you're using 4 to 5 different tools, whether it's project management, AI, um, you don't want to kind of get into the habit of trusting it too much. I saw a study already that's come out that talks about where you plug AI into the creative process, um, can really impact the output. So if you're just sitting down and, okay, I don't really have a plan yet, but I'm just going to start popping this into ChatGPT, your brain kind of power within that and the creative juices that you're putting into that project are significantly lower than when you plug in ChatGPT as kind of an idea bouncer offer project, kind of partner. Um, Studies have shown that that's when you really come up with really quality content and the output gets much improved, because it's just a matter of you're not trusting it the whole entire process. You're actually still using your brain at the front end. And I'm afraid that's where we're getting up. I work with a guy in St. Louis. Joe Biden, a couple years ago put out I didn't work with Joe Biden, but Joe Biden put out the executive kind of report on AI. Like, here's how we need to be using it. This is what's going on. So I asked this executive who's supposed to be pretty good with AI, uh, what are your thoughts on this? Because I think we could do a really cool kind of thought leadership piece on this. And the dude sends me back, I mean, straight up Chat GPT, all the bells and whistles. I could tell the whole thing came from chat, and it came to me in like 2 minutes. So I was like, you put zero thought into this. We are not going to look smart if we reply with this kind of thought leadership. So in terms of being able to own the AI content and make sure you understand how to differentiate it from what other people are doing, that's where that creative process can really get interesting. Um, I'll pop down to this last one. A lot of times, if you start to create content, and you start to pour in a lot of time, into it because you're passionate about it, the worst thing that can happen is you post it and then you get crickets, and that happens all the time. It's okay. So I would say if you start to post more as an individual, you start to post more as a team, whether it's on LinkedIn or other channels, email campaigns, webinars. If 2 people show up to your webinar, that's okay. Keep improving, keep going, keep, refining the message and the approach. It might take a little while for people to catch on to your cadence and your ideas and kind of what you're trying to do. The worst thing you can do is kind of just start and stop, start and stop. And that's what I see a lot of people doing. If I have a client and one of their team members starts to get active on LinkedIn, I am sure to send them a message that says, great going, this is looking great. do you need a hand creating kind of a content calendar so you don't just fall off a cliff here in a month and stop posting? Because that's what happens a lot if we see the low engagement. LinkedIn rewards all of the consistency that you can muster. So if you can devote, hey, I'm going to be posting, 3 times a week. It's going to be about this, this, and this. I'm going to keep my content flow kind of consistent. That's the best case. And I think you used to have to use a scheduler like Buffer or HubSpot. LinkedIn, now you can just schedule as many posts as you want through the native kind of post scheduler. So go to start a new post, write it all out, and then hit, post this later, post this in a couple days. What I like to do with that is I know that I've got posts coming out the rest of the month, but if something pops up and I want to adjust my cadence and adjust my schedule, I can move things around. If I wanted to add more to that post, it makes it really easy to go in and make those edits. So all of that to say, just kind of keep pushing. Keep going to as many, change your audience up if you want to. If you think you are sending an email blast to the right audience, but no one's clicking, no one's going to the landing page, no one's going to check it out, change your audience up. See if you can go get more, audience members from a different sector, or just get creative with who you're going after. I feel like that's kind of the best way to pivot versus just stopping and starting, because that's where, again, a lot of teams, that momentum is just gone. And you'll be way less likely to keep going if you don't have some kind of calendar, some kind of project management to be able to push you. Um, so I think that's about it for that. I talked a little bit about PR. I will pop this up here. I don't know if everybody can see that. Michelle, if I need to make that smaller so we get the people off of it. I mean, because on my end, I see a bunch of tiles, but that's okay as long as everybody can take that. That is going to lead you to our website. I'm not trying to sell you anything. We created an article that kind of mirrored this presentation. And then we also, for each one of those steps in our unstuck, methodology, just included a few questions you can ask your team, ask yourselves, to hopefully get you unstuck. And then I do recommend, you know, getting a little bit more organized with your content, letting AI help you. Those are kind of the strategies that we're seeing work in terms of companies. Can't stress video enough. Again, we are seeing people who would never want to be on camera. They take some convincing, but it is not that complicated. And people want to see the real stuff now. Like, videos do not need to be overly polished, and you don't need to be sitting in a fancy office. The most powerful ones we're seeing, the ones that are going semi-viral for our clients, they're sitting in their kitchen, they're sitting in their living room. It's more about the content and their personality that comes through with that video. And that's what's kind of making a difference for them. So I will stop there, and hopefully there are some questions. Definitely happy to answer as many as you guys have.
Joe, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
You talk about video, and I know we've got folks who are from various different kinds of agencies, from small business to nonprofits to big hospitals and all of that on the call. And we also have somebody who is an expert in video and producing video for a lot of those folks. So what is the balance, and what do you recommend to people who are trying to start that video process and figuring out and getting over the hump for, okay, this is what I'm going to produce, and when do they make that judgment call of, I need that more professional looking video, or I can just do like me on camera. Excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I think that's great. It definitely comes down to audience and what they expect from you. You're not going to want to put out some of those more authentic. There's still a place for the highly produced commercial style videos, of course. But in terms of micro influencers and people who are trying to make a name for themselves to also help their business, we do recommend getting some kind of organized system. At least start with a list of topics you'd like to create. And just start testing, and I think if you have a team, if you have a small team, you can get their feedback, get their ideas for, well, let's change this as far as lighting, or could you talk a little slower? Do we need to brand the video with some of those AI tools, or bring in a video editor who can help give that more polish? And because that's one thing you do miss from working with the AI editors, is there's no collaboration, and you're kind of just on that tool Opus Clip, you're kind of just left to whatever they decide to give you. So I do love working with local videographers for specific projects, just to kind of have that idea share. Because I think that's the biggest part. You kind of need that confidence boost. Like, okay, we're going out there with video, so you want to make sure you've done all your research and you feel pretty buttoned up. We definitely don't recommend over scripting. We have a trademark attorney in LA who talks about trademark law, all the big cases that come up, Adidas versus Nike. There was a case last week. If you look her up, her name's Relanie. We wrote a post for her about Lego My Eggo. They sued a food truck that was Lego My Egg Roll, and they threw a huge fit, sued the food truck. I thought it was great publicity for the food truck. But that post for her got, 100 something thousand impressions, a bunch of new clients. She got reached out to by a publication that wants her to write about that topic. So you just never know. I didn't expect that one to kind of go nuts for her, but as far as she does a lot of video too, that's why I bring her up. And her video is very authentic. She wants to be Sesame Street meets TMZ when it comes to trademark law, and that's not the right strategy for everybody. But it's kind of really taking the time on that front end of what do we want to be seen as and how can we make the video reflect that. So definitely a little bit more complicated than just putting out a few videos and seeing how they do. I do like to strategize and make sure that you're putting the right thought into it. Are you doing a lot of video, Michelle?
I don't do a lot of video. I mean, I work at a big company, so a lot of the stuff that we do is all very
Yeah.
highly produced, so. But I think that that's an area where, we could explore some more if we could get folks to think about it. But I don't see them letting go of the very organized video.
Yep. Any other questions? If not, I'll just tell stories.
When you talk about LinkedIn content too, or any kind of content, I mean, I know for the different socials, I think that's something some people struggle with too, is what socials should I spend my time on? And then when I do that, what should my cadence be? What kind of content should I have? And I think, that's really a big question for especially nonprofits and for smaller businesses who don't have a lot of time to produce things. But
Yep.
how do you make that content and get it out there?
Yeah, and I think I'll get back to that in just a second too, but at least on LinkedIn, and I think all the social platforms do this too, you're seeing profiles be more rewarded, I guess, by the algorithm if you are actually engaging and treating it like social media, not just posting and then leaving. They're watching to see if you're clicking that little more button on people's posts. Are you actually reading a full post? Are you skimming things? Are you spending time leaving thoughtful comments, or are you just hitting like? The posts that are getting the most push right now are the ones that are generating those other emojis. It sounds stupid, but the laugh emoji, the clap, the support, at least on LinkedIn, because that shows people took more than a half second to engage with it. So in terms of if you are still gun shy about putting content out there on social, just starting by liking and sharing and leaving a comment every once in a while, you'll start to see more eyeballs visit your profile. If you look at the back end analytics of LinkedIn and you say, wow, I'm seeing my profile views go up because I'm becoming a little bit more active. You do not need to reinvent and stress yourself out by putting out all this content. That can be a good baby step for anybody. As far as which platform to use, it really does depend on audience. I wouldn't put my communications stuff too much on Facebook just because no one cares. I try to, but unless I have a story about something interesting, because a lot of my work is on supporting job seekers too, so I hear a lot of interesting stories from them. Um, I'm not going to waste my time on that. I don't believe in just hitting a button that sends the same message across all the platforms. I do recommend you be intentional. Working with a pediatrician's office down here in Marion, and he wants to obviously get more moms to look at his content and engage and come into the office. So we're going to start doing some trendy stuff on TikTok. And he would never even think that because it does sound kind of scary traditionally in that space. But I think that content's really going to do well for him and get in front of the right audience. So it's not one size fits all. I definitely, that's on that strategy side and understanding the goals and setting the message up. That's where a lot of that makes a difference.
Hey, Joe, would you mind talking a little bit about AI and the perception? What are you seeing with job seekers and job hirers in their approach to AI and how writers and creatives can utilize it?
Yeah. So job seekers in terms of being in this field, the communications field.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you sell yourself on someone who's able to, I love how you put own the tool, control the tool, and you're not trading it in for your own creativity, your value
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
as an employee.
Yeah, it's great. I think what I see a lot of job seekers get stuck on right now is hitting that easy apply button on LinkedIn. And then, I mean, there's 1,500 other people doing the same exact thing. It literally, I've seen some applications or announcements field like 1,500, interested parties. So that's not the way to cut through. That should be part of your approach. There's obviously jobs that you can land through LinkedIn, easy apply, and all that good stuff. But I have seen more success with it's a little messier and it does take time, but really who's in your audience who you can leverage. And not that you just want to be asking for those connections all the time, but you do want to make sure you have a list. I always tell people 5 to 10 people who they'll go to bat for you. You know that if you ask them to, you know, give you an idea of connections or opportunities that are out there that they're not just going to ghost you. Go through revamp your resume a little bit, use some AI. I do recommend that, with ChatGPT especially, you can obviously plug your resume in. You can plug in 5 job announcements. You can chat will now, at least on the one that I'm doing that's paid, it will now crawl websites. It's not just an in-house language model. So give it a couple links to some job announcements. Ask it to review your resume. Ask it to give you ideas on projects that you should highlight. When I work with hiring managers, they are not going to go through a couple pages of a resume. That hasn't changed. So what we try to build is at the top of the page, in terms of page one, above the fold, like a newspaper terminology. You got to have 3 or 4 signature projects that you've done. How have you used, and AI is important to that. How have you used AI? How have you automated tasks, improved efficiency, saved costs? Have you led a big communications project post merger and acquisition? Has your nonprofit went out and got a bunch of funding? Those are kind of the projects that separate you. Otherwise, everything else I'm telling you is going to be the exact same as other candidates because that's what everyone's doing right now. They're all pumping it into ChatGPT. I would say the length of resume too has kind of changed. We went through a little bit of a stretch there where everyone was like, 1 page only, don't give me more than a page. But when you're going through application tracking systems and LinkedIn's algorithm and the easy apply, that's all a keyword game. So the more keywords you can have on your resume, the better. I'm not saying put together a 20-page resume, but everyone should probably be looking at a 2-pager right now because you can say the right keywords in multiple ways. That will help you perform better and your resume and your LinkedIn profile will populate in those searches. So there's a whole bunch changing due to AI, but I definitely recommend you using it as a tool to help you optimize your materials and your LinkedIn. And then we're seeing, honestly, like as people get more active on LinkedIn, again, that's just a visibility thing that, hopefully you start to see recruiters reach out and you start to see opportunities pop up. Yeah, it's crazy right now.
Does anybody else have questions?
Can I just ask a question here? This way.
Sure.
I was particularly listening to that last bit, and I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned in a lot of ways, and it's almost discouraging to me the way the job search process and LinkedIn and so forth. And maybe I'm going down a path that's not really directly related to this webinar, but I'm just kind of wondering,
Yeah.
I feel discouraged.
The job market right now is hot. You can land something if you're a job seeker and you have the right strategy. It is competitive, but it is hot, and I think it's, I'm seeing less and less. So if you are kind of you've been around for a while, there was again same stretch where age discrimination was a thing. We're seeing more companies welcome that multi-generational, not everyone for sure, but there is something to that. So I would definitely encourage you to just stay positive, really use your network. That's always been a thing. Cover letters have made a comeback. Anything that's going to separate you, there, because everything's AI driven. If you have a really compelling cover letter that tells your story and shows the human being that will eventually review it that you have something to bring to the table, I'm seeing those make a difference for people. Whereas for a 10-year stretch there, cover letters were not a thing. They were just like, why would you guys give me a cover letter? I'm not going to read this. So I did not mean for that to sound doom and gloom.
Yeah, and I don't want people to think I'm looking for a job because I'm not. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm kind of discouraged at the process, the way it works now.
I am too. I wish there was more. And again, I think we might boomerang back to it. It is very cold right now. The process is cold. So if you're in HR or if you're a people officer or leading HR teams, the more you can make that process feel more engaging and actually that there's people on the other side of the wall, not just a bunch of bots, the better. So that I work with HR teams all the time trying to figure that out. How do we make this more engaging? How do we still use tech to make our processes quicker, but how can we make people feel like they're people? And those are the companies that are going to win. Otherwise, yeah, it's definitely kind of a cold process right now.
Joe, I know that Vanessa Ferguson, one of my cohorts at NPR, has a question for you as well.
Sure.
Okay, so I thought this would just maybe have a moment for some free consulting. So if that's not okay, you tell me no.
It's all
But
okay. Yep.
okay, cool. So since you mentioned NPR, and I know Michelle's gonna love this idea. Um, so obviously we're kind of having a difficult time with
Yes.
our national NPR and then all the member stations as well. So
Yep.
what would be some suggestions you have for NPR member stations, people who work for those stations to maybe engage with the public, get them on board with supporting NPR in whatever way that looks like?
Yeah, that would be a deep one. I would wonder kind of how are you doing that now? And are there ways you can say, okay, this way actually this one gets people going, people engage, we get positive feedback. How can we do more of that? Is it kind of a town hall approach or is it community by community or some things you can do kind of from the umbrella NPR that would help that? So I would have a lot of questions for you there.
So I'll just throw out real quick that I think because it is news, there's this reticence to show personality.
Sure.
And so I'm starting to see like Peter Sagal from Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, very popular national show, just
Yep.
started his own TikTok. And I know Michelle really wants to start a TikTok, right, Michelle?
Of
So,
course.
I can tell she does, yeah.
yeah. So like I'm just trying to think of what's the low-hanging fruit that maybe everyone else sees that we're just not grasping.
Yeah, it's all about people now and personalities. Like I said, with the independent publications, I started one that covers SIU sports. So down here in Saluki land, all the newspapers are done. Like the local news channels have fired everyone. No one's covering these athletes. And when I went to school there back in my day, I knew all the student athletes. I knew who they were. I knew where they came from. So we started up this little, startup independent publication. Could not believe the response. And parents like, man, thank you guys for showcasing these kids and they need more of this, blah, blah, blah. So I think, and they want the authenticity behind it. They want to talk to the journalists. They want to see the process. Behind the scenes stuff is huge right now because we don't have to worry as much about the shine and the shimmer. Those videos on Facebook that are performing the best on Reels that everyone's just doing this through, they're showing behind the scenes. They're kind of getting into the process. So I think people would love that kind of stuff from you guys. And yeah, it is more than just the story. It's who's putting it together and who that face is. So Vanessa, I can already tell you'd be great on TikTok.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, she would be
Michelle,
no
no,
doubt.
Michelle is the one who wants that ticket. No, but thank you. That's a great some great thoughts there. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I know it's a challenging time for sure. There's a lot going on.
So with that, I think we will wrap things up. Joe, if you want to, again, the QR code is still up. If you guys want to click on that, that gives you some more information. And Joe, is there another way folks can get a hold of you as well?
Yeah, there's my cell phone right there. I'm at Joe with the Upwrite Group. LinkedIn, there's not very many people with my last name on there, so you'll find me pretty easy. So yeah, I connect any way you want. Would love to talk and definitely just love having these webinars and the conversations that lead to more things. So thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
Thank you very
Michelle,
much.
can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought this was the time in the program where we were going to talk about Saluki sports
There's
and,
John.
and
There
the
he
underdog.
is.
I mean,
John,
Oh,
that's the
dog.
next hour. Hang around for the next hour. Yeah.
I've been published in the underdog. It's a
John was a
fantastic.
yeah, John gave us a guest article that did really well about if you haven't read it, I'll maybe send you guys a link, but John was like, I got this idea for an article and I read it. I was like, holy crap, that's amazing.
This is really this is great. I just wanted to say hi and actually say hello to you in person since we'd only talked
Awesome.
via email.
Yeah, thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Several dogs on this call, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
And again, if you're on the call and you're not a member of MICA, we hope you will consider doing that. Just go to our website, which is midilcommunications.org, and we will hopefully see you at more of our programs. And thanks so much, everybody, for attending today.